What we're going to do is we're going to do a bunch of lab exercises now. We're going to utilize Data Loader. That's our Java-based tool for it ultimately uses the Web Services API. We're going to use it in two ways. One, we're going to do the GUI version of Data Loader, and then the other thing is we're going to set up some XML files to utilize the command line version of Data Loader. And then finally, we're going to do something with mass transferring our owners, which is just another feature. All right, so our setup for this is that we're going to upload a bunch of job application candidate and position data into our recruiting application. All right, so why don't we take a few minutes to do a demo, and then I'll allow you all to work on the tool. All right. All right. So in your case, what we have installed is Data Loader version 14. Now, there's not really much of it. Every time we do a release, we're currently at version 16.0. We update Data Loader to the latest version to support the latest version of the API, for instance. You guys in class are going to be using 14.0, and the only reason it's really not that different in terms of the functionality. It's not like it gets changed in a large way. But the reason I want you to use that is that in some of our batch files, it's specifically referencing the path C:\program files data loader 14.0. So if you want, you can download 16.0. I'd be impressed if you could find a difference between the actual experience. Obviously when you're at home, sure, go out and get the latest version and install it. But like I said, during the lab, please use the 14.0 because we do have some absolute pathing that is referencing that directory location. Okay. All right, so in my case, I'm going to open up the Data Loader. And so here it is. So Data Loader is a Java, it's built on Java. It is a client tool. So one of the things I can do is I can click on, I could click cancel here, but from this list of options, I have the ability to do inserts, updates, deletes, and upserts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an upsert. I can also export, by the way. Also don't want to forget that. But I'm going to show you how you can do an upsert. By the way, one of the things that I'm kind of bypassing is that there's a whole set of connection settings. For instance, things like if you're behind a proxy-based server or proxy server, you could enter in that information. So there's some things that you can do. This one's pretty important. If you're going to a sandbox, if you're loading data into a sandbox, the URL is going to be different. Okay, so it's going to be test.salesforce.com. So something to keep in mind. Okay. All right. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on File Upsert. Now here's the deal. When we do these lab exercises, I'm going to give you all new org IDs. And the reason is that you might have made a typo, or you might have, for one of your field names, you might have typed it slightly differently. And we have in our CSV files, we have references to those field names. And for me to debug, so when things go wrong with doing the exercises, it eliminates a million variables that I would have to deal with. And so that's why we give you new orgs, because then we know the field names match up. As you'll see on the whiteboard, there's admin, and then it says at dev 401 day 4, and then you're going to use your unique ID. So utilize that login ID for performing or for doing these exercises. Okay? In my case, I'm going to log in as admin at dev 401 day 4, and then my unique number and my password. Okay. And I'm going to click on login. And what's going to happen is that I've successfully logged in. Okay. Now I'm going to click on the next button, and it's going to ask me, okay, well, what object type are you uploading? Are you upserting? What is it? It's only one thing at any given time. Okay. When you're using the GUI tool. Now you can actually set this up to run multiple operations when you batch it. In fact, you can create a batch of things to do. So I guess that's why they call them batch files. So here I'm going to upload some positions. Okay. It's going to prompt me show CSV file. So I'm sorry, or choose CSV file. So in my case, here we have a bunch of comma-separated value files. I'm going to be working on positions in my case, but if I go out and show you what one of these looks like, so here's my Dev 401 directory, here is my legacy recruiting data, and then here's my data. And so just to show you what this looks like, if I right-click on positions and I open it up in TextPad, it's just your standard comma-separated value file. Now, one of the key things about this CSV file, though, is that the first row are column headers, and then every other row is data values. Okay, so that's going to come back into play because that's going to allow us to do some mapping later on. So what we're going to do is I'm going to open up the CSV file that represents my positions. Okay. I'm going to click on the next button now, and it just tells me, okay, it looks like we got 14 records in this case. So it's going to say to match on position. So I'm uploading positions. To match on a position when I'm doing my upsert, what field do you want me to use? Okay, I have a choice. I can use my Salesforce ID, or I can use my legacy position number. So one of the things that exists is that we're going to set up, or we already have set up, a field which is marked as an external ID, and we're going to utilize that to determine how we identify our unique records. Okay. Now think about what's going on behind the scenes. In order to populate this list, it's somehow using our API to go up and say, return all the fields that are either Salesforce IDs or marked as external IDs. Okay? So that's what this list is going to contain. So it's going up to the database, your org's database, to get information about your data model. Okay? So I'm going to select legacy position number. All right? That's how I'm going to identify. I'm using my external ID. Now, I'm also going to be doing an upsert with relationships. So in my case, I have a reference to a hiring manager in my records, right? And that reference, I'm going to utilize the legacy employee number. So anytime I have a relationship up to something else, I can then utilize my external IDs on that remote object. So legacy employee number that is not a field on a position. That is a field on the user table, right? Okay. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to click on next. Now, what you're going to see here, the file column header, what this is that from my file, these are all the first row, which was my column headers. What I can do is I can create a map now of mapping my CSV file columns to the fields in my database. Okay, so I'm going to create a new one. Here we have the, I'm sorry, I'm going to not choose an existing one. I'm going to create a new one. Okay. And what it does is this is a list. So this represents my fields in the database. Okay. Now it has some intelligence to go, okay, if it has the same file column header as the API name in the database, I will auto match it for you. So there's a button here that says auto match fields to columns. So I can click on that and it says, okay, I see the created date and the created date, the date closed and the date closed, date opened. All of these have the same thing, so I'm gonna match those up. Okay? All right. Now you can also change things around. So let's say that you did not use the same column headers. One of the things you can do is you can remove a mapping by taking a field and dragging it off up to here. Okay? Now if I wanted to remap the department, I could then take department and drag it back down to there. And so I can perform the mapping by doing drag and drop from my list of fields on the top down to my list of column headers in the bottom. All right. You can also save this definition. All right. And it has a mapping file. Okay, so you can later reuse it. Question?
I guess I'm not. So the top part represents the ones that were auto-matched, and the bottom?
No, the top one represents fields in the database. The bottom one are the column names from my, these are my columns.
And then the name column are the fields from the object?
These are field names. These are from the CSV file from the column header.
I don't see these fields up above them.
Well, let me, so here, for instance, approver, you know, so here's department, oh, I'm sorry, that's because these are the ones that are unmatched. So if I drag department up here and I drop it, so now a department appears up here. These are the fields. Let me actually hit cancel here. So I'm going to click, let me do this again. I'm going to do create or edit a map. All right. Now notice that none of my fields have been mapped yet. And this list is long because these are all my fields that have not yet been mapped. So now when I say auto match fields to columns, the list gets a lot shorter because these are ones that did not automatically get matched up. Okay, so department doesn't appear up here anymore because it was now mapped.
All right, so the top are the fields that have not been matched yet.
Yeah, except when you initially load it, in which case it's all fields. Yeah, so this is the complete list of fields associated with my position object. Now it is a list of the ones that have not been auto-matched. Okay. All right, yeah. All right. Okay. And then what you're going to do is you're going to click on Next.
There is one field unmatched. You're not going to match it?
Let's see here. So hiring manager legacy ID. Yeah, in fact, I'm doing this poorly. Yeah, this is to map the hiring manager. We're not going to do a Salesforce ID, but we are going to do a external ID. So we're going to use, in our case, so what I just did was, in uploading my position, I'm going to do an upsert with relationships. And the way I'm going to define the relationship with the hiring manager is on the user object is a legacy employee num. Okay. So every user here has a field called legacy employee num. Okay. So that's my external ID. All right. And I'm going to use that to map positions to hiring managers. Okay. So what I did, by default, it populated with the Salesforce ID. But I'm not doing that. I'm going to use the legacy. I'm going to use the legacy number, which is in my CSV file. So this is the name of the field in the CSV file. It's called hiring manager legacy ID. Now in the database, on the related hiring manager in the user table is a field called legacy employee num. So this is where we're doing upsert with relationships using external IDs. All right? So that's where we're performing that mapping. Okay?
So do you need to take out hiring manager mapping for this?
Yeah, we do. You're only using one thing to do the mapping. Yeah.
There are two fields for them. Why don't we use both of them?
This one contains the Salesforce ID, or this one would contain the Salesforce ID, and then this one would contain the legacy ID.
What will happen if you just take the hiring manager up and just map it there?
Oh well, this is okay. So let me try and let's take a look at the CSV file. Let's take a look at what's in there. So I might as well just open this up with Excel. All right, so in my CSV file, there are two columns. One is the hiring manager, and the hiring manager is just a reference to a name. We don't need that. I mean, that's of no use to us. Okay? It happens to be in our data, but we can't do anything with just Megan Smith. All right? What we need is that external ID in order to perform the mapping to to our foreign key, right?
So that hiring manager has done nothing to do with the hiring manager field that...
No. Up on the database, we have a field called hiring manager. And what that contains is a Salesforce record ID. Nowhere in my CSV file is there a Salesforce record ID.
That's a
So
coincidence.
that's useless to us, yeah.
That's just a naming coincidence.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is. It just so happens that in our CSV file, we had the name of the hiring manager, and that also happens to be the label of our field using the Salesforce ID. So, okay.
It won't resolve that reference.
No. Up on the database, that contains the Salesforce ID. In my CSV file, that contains Megan Smith. Two different things, even though they have the same label, or in this case, column header.
Does the wizard resolve that?
Well, what the wizard did was the wizard said, when you
Not
did
this
the
one,
auto match,
Not this wizard, the import wizard.
what's the question?
So if you give it the label rather than a reference ID in a load file for the import wizard,
Will it auto match?
auto match.
Let me check on that. Will the import wizard auto match?
Because otherwise you're going to be playing with a lot of IDs.
I mean, they're two different tools, so they're going to work. I mean, they do the same thing roughly, but they're going to work very differently.
So to actually load the hiring manager field, you'd have to have the Salesforce ID in that field to load into it.
No. So what I did was I created so if we go here, there's a field called legacy employee number on the user. If we take a look at customize and we customize our users, here's where I define my custom fields. And legacy employee number is a text field, which is also an external ID. So this is using the standard external ID functionality for loading in, for defining the relationship.
Is external ID always text?
Excuse me?
Is external ID always a text or
No,
it
it can be one of three types. It can be text, number, or email are the data types of the field. Okay. All right, you guys ready to go? All right, so you're gonna do this and use the tool. You're gonna do both the GUI and then the command line tool, in which you're gonna edit some XML files. Okay.
For more information on Salesforce.com training and certification, please visit www.salesforce.com/training.